What started as an impossible river crossing attempt led to the fastest bridge construction in military history. March 22, 1945. The Rhine River, Germany's last natural fortress. For centuries, military strategists called it uncrossable under fire. Napoleon himself needed weeks to bridge it. The Germans believed they had months to prepare their defenses. They had 18 hours. This is the story of the 249th Engineer Combat Battalion, a unit of American soldiers who weren't supposed to be heroes. They were builders, not fighters. But on one cold March night, they would accomplish what the German High Command deemed physically impossible. They would build a 1,200-foot floating bridge across one of Europe's most treacherous rivers. In the dark, under constant artillery fire, with German saboteurs swimming toward them with explosives strapped to their chests. And they would do it in less time than it takes to watch 2 movies. The stakes revolved around the engineers' speed and ingenuity, determining whether General Patton's entire Third Army would be trapped on the wrong side of the Rhine, or whether they'd punch through to Berlin. Let me paint the picture of what failure meant. By March 1945, the Allies had pushed the Germans back across France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. But the Rhine River was different. It wasn't just water. It was a 1,200-foot-wide moat protecting the German heartland. The current ran at 8 miles per hour. The depth varied from 15 to 30 feet, and the Germans had spent months fortifying every crossing point with artillery, machine gun nests, and observation posts. 7 days earlier, on March 7th, the Allies caught their first break. The Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen was captured intact, the only standing bridge across the Rhine. For 10 glorious days it funneled troops and equipment into Germany. Then it collapsed, killing 28 American engineers and trapping thousands of soldiers on the wrong side. The message was clear. You cannot rely on German bridges. You must build your own. General George S. Patton had a plan. His Third Army would cross at Oppenheim, 25 miles south of Mainz. The location was strategic, lightly defended, with good approach roads. But there was one problem. The 249th Engineer Combat Battalion had never built a bridge under combat conditions. Their commander, Colonel William Carter, was 34 years old. Most of his men were in their early 20s. They'd trained in Louisiana swamps and English countryside. They'd studied bridge construction manuals and practiced with pontoons in calm water. But this was different. The Rhine at Oppenheim was 366 meters wide, wider than 3 football fields. The current was vicious. German artillery had the entire crossing zone pre-sighted. Intelligence reports confirmed enemy swimmers were being trained for bridge sabotage, and Patton wanted it done in one night. Carter gathered his battalion. He didn't sugarcoat it. "Gentlemen," he said, "we're going to build a bridge that military engineers say cannot be built. We're going to do it in the dark, under fire, in less than 24 hours. Some of us won't make it home. But if we succeed, we'll save thousands of American lives and end this war months earlier." The stakes couldn't be higher. A twist occurs when the engineers discover their standard bridge design won't work in the Rhine's powerful current. Here's what most people don't understand about military pontoon bridges. They're not just floating platforms. They're precision-engineered systems that must account for water speed, depth, load capacity, and enemy interference. The standard M1940 aluminum treadway bridge used inflatable rubber pontoons. Each pontoon was 33 feet long and could support 25 tons. The plan was simple: Anchor pontoons every 15 meters with steel cables at 45-degree angles. Lay aluminum treadway sections across them, and you've got yourself a bridge. Except the Rhine wasn't cooperating. The engineers ran the calculations. At 8 miles per hour current speed, the lateral force on each pontoon would be massive. Standard anchoring wouldn't hold. The bridge would twist, buckle, and tear apart within hours. Carter called an emergency meeting with his senior engineers. They had 12 hours before construction began. Lieutenant James Morrison, the battalion's structural engineer, proposed something radical. What if we don't fight the current? What if we use it? Morrison's idea was brilliant and terrifying. Instead of anchoring the pontoons perpendicular to the current, they'd angle them slightly downstream. The current would push against the pontoons, but the angle would redirect that force into the anchor cables, actually strengthening the bridge's stability. But it had never been tested under combat conditions. Carter made the call. We're doing it Morrison's way. If it fails, it fails. But if we use the standard design, we're guaranteed to fail. March 22nd, 10 p.m. The engineers moved to the riverbank under cover of darkness. They'd spent the day assembling pontoons, checking equipment, and rehearsing their roles. Now came the hard part, building the bridge. In the dark, under fire. The first pontoon hit the water at 10:47 p.m. Immediately, the current grabbed it, trying to sweep it downstream. 6 engineers fought to control it with guide ropes while others worked to secure the anchor cables. Then the Germans opened fire. Increase pace. Action sequence. A twist occurs when German artillery zeroes in and the engineers realize they're not just building a bridge, they're in a firefight. Artillery explosions, shouting. The first shell hit 50 yards from the riverbank, sending up a geyser of water and mud. The engineers didn't stop working. The second shell hit closer, 30 yards. The third shell killed 2 men instantly. Private First Class Robert Chen and Corporal Michael O'Brien. They were securing anchor cables when the shell landed. They never had a chance. Carter faced an impossible choice: pull back and abandon the mission, or push forward knowing more men would die. He pushed forward. "Keep building," he shouted over the explosions. "Every minute we delay costs lives on the other side." The engineers worked in organized chaos, teams of 6 men per pontoon. One team would guide the pontoon into position while another secured anchor cables. A third team laid the aluminum treadway sections. A fourth team installed protective barriers. And they did it all while German shells rained down around them. But here's where the story gets even more intense. At 1:30 a.m., a sentry spotted something in the water. Flashlight beams revealed the nightmare Carter had feared. German combat swimmers. These weren't regular soldiers, they were Kampfschwimmer, elite saboteurs trained to destroy bridges with underwater explosives. They wore black wetsuits, carried waterproof demolition charges, and could hold their breath for over 3 minutes. And they were heading straight for the partially completed bridge. The engineers weren't trained for this. They were builders, not combat troops. But they grabbed rifles, carbines, whatever weapons they could find. Sergeant Thomas Kowalski made a split-second decision. "Light up the river, now!" Searchlights blazed across the water, catching 3 swimmers in the open. Machine gun fire erupted. The water churned with bullets. 2 swimmers went under and didn't resurface. The third tried to attach his explosive charge to a pontoon before a rifle shot from Private James Rodriguez dropped him. Rodriguez would later say he'd never fired his weapon in anger before that night. He was a carpenter from San Antonio who'd joined the engineers because he was good with his hands. Now he'd just killed a man to save his brothers. But the swimmers weren't the only problem. At 2:15 a.m., intelligence reported German artillery was repositioning for a concentrated barrage. They had 20 minutes, maybe less, before the riverbank became a kill zone. Carter did the math. They were only 40% complete. At current pace, they'd need another 10 hours. They didn't have 10 hours. "Double the crews," Carter ordered. "I don't care if we're working on top of each other, we finish this bridge before dawn." What happened next defied military engineering doctrine. A twist occurs when the engineers discover that speed isn't enough. They need to innovate in real time or watch the entire operation collapse. Here's what makes this moment so remarkable. Military bridges are built sequentially. You complete one section before starting the next. It's safe, methodical, and slow. Carter threw out the rule book. He ordered 3 separate construction teams to work simultaneously from different points on the river. The North Bank team, the South Bank team, and, most audaciously, a middle team working from boats. It was chaos. It was dangerous. It was brilliant. But there was a problem nobody anticipated. The middle sections weren't lining up. At 3:45 a.m., with German artillery repositioning and dawn approaching, the engineers discovered a 6-foot gap between the north and middle sections. The current had pushed the middle section slightly downstream. 6 feet doesn't sound like much, but in bridge construction, it's catastrophic. The treadway sections wouldn't connect. Vehicles couldn't cross. The entire bridge would be useless. Lieutenant Morrison stared at the gap, his mind racing. Standard procedure was to disassemble the middle section and rebuild it. That would take hours they didn't have. "We need to move the entire middle section upstream," Morrison said. "All 200 feet of it, while it's still in the water. Let the impossibility sink in." Carter looked at him like he was insane. "That's never been done." "Neither has building a Rhine bridge in one night," Morrison shot back. They had 90 minutes before the German barrage. Morrison's plan was insane, but mathematically sound. They'd attach additional anchor cables to the upstream side of the middle section, then use boats with outboard motors to provide thrust, while teams on both banks hauled on the cables. Essentially, they'd drag 200 feet of floating bridge upstream against an 8 miles per hour current. "If the cables snap, men die," Carter said quietly. "If we don't try, the mission fails," Morrison replied. Carter gave the order. Boat motors, men shouting, cables straining. 40 men on the north bank, 40 on the south. 6 boats providing thrust. And Morrison standing in the middle, coordinating by radio, praying the math held. "On my mark," Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. 3, 2, 1, pull! Cables groaning, boat motors roaring, men shouting in unison. The middle section moved. 6 inches, then a foot. The cables screamed under tension, steel braids stretching to their breaking point. "Keep pulling, don't stop," Morrison shouted. 2 feet, 3 feet. The current fought them every inch. Then, crack! One of the upstream cables snapped, whipping through the air like a steel serpent. It missed Private Rodriguez's head by inches, slamming into a pontoon with a metallic scream. "Redistribute the load," Carter yelled. "North bank, double your pull." The men dug in, boots slipping in mud, hands bleeding through gloves, every muscle burning. They pulled like their lives depended on it. Because they did. 4 feet. 5 feet. The gap narrowed. At 4:52 a.m., with German artillery beginning their barrage preparation, the sections aligned. "Lock it down!" Morrison screamed. Engineers swarmed the connection point, bolting treadway sections together with pneumatic drills. Sparks flew in the darkness. The bridge shuddered with each impact, but held. At 5:03 a.m., 11 minutes before the German barrage, the final bolt was secured. The bridge was complete. The climax showcases the engineers' victory against impossible odds and the price they paid for it. Carter stood at the north end of the bridge, staring at what his men had built. 1,200 feet of aluminum and steel stretching across the Rhine. It looked fragile, like it shouldn't exist, but it did. At 5:47 a.m., as the sun broke over the horizon, General George S. Patton arrived at the riverbank in his jeep. He stepped out, looked at the bridge, then at Carter and his exhausted engineers. For once, Patton, famous for his profanity and bravado, was speechless. Then he smiled. "Colonel," Patton said quietly, "I've seen a lot of impossible things in this war. But this," he gestured at the bridge, "this is the most impossible thing I've ever seen actually work." Patton insisted on being the first to cross. His jeep rolled onto the aluminum treadway at 6:02 a.m. The bridge swayed slightly under the weight, Morrison's angled pontoon design flexing exactly as calculated, but held firm. When Patton reached the far side, he turned back and saluted the engineers. Within the hour, tanks rolled across, then artillery, then thousands of infantry. The bridge that couldn't be built became the lifeline for Patton's entire Third Army. But the cost was real. 7 engineers died that night. 19 were wounded. Their names deserve to be remembered. Private First Class Robert Chen, Corporal Michael O'Brien, Sergeant David Martinez, Private Joseph Williams, Corporal James Anderson, Private First Class Thomas Lee, Sergeant Robert Taylor. They died building a bridge, not in glorious combat, but in cold water and mud, doing the unglamorous work that wins wars. The 249th Engineer Combat Battalion would go on to build 17 more bridges across Germany. But none as fast, none as desperate, none as impossible as the Rhine Bridge at Oppenheim. Slow, reflective pace. The conclusion calls on viewers to remember that wars are won not just by generals and soldiers, but by engineers who build the impossible. Today, if you visit Oppenheim, there's a small memorial plaque near the riverbank. Most tourists walk past it without noticing. It reads, "Here on March 22nd through 3rd, 1945, the 249th Engineer Combat Battalion built a pontoon bridge across the Rhine River in 18 hours under enemy fire. 7 men gave their lives. Thousands were saved." The bridge itself lasted only 3 weeks before a more permanent structure replaced it. Then that bridge was replaced, and replaced again. Today, a modern highway bridge spans the Rhine at Oppenheim, carrying commuters who have no idea what happened beneath them 80 years ago. But here's what matters. The Rhine Bridge at Oppenheim proved something the German High Command thought impossible. That American ingenuity, courage, and sheer determination could overcome any obstacle. It shortened the war. It saved lives. It demonstrated that the impossible is just a problem that hasn't been solved yet. And it was built by men who weren't supposed to be heroes. They were carpenters and welders and mechanics. They were kids from farms and cities who joined the engineers because they were good with their hands. But on one cold March night, they became legends. The next time you cross a bridge, any bridge, remember the 249th. Remember that someone designed it, someone built it, and someone risked everything to make sure you could cross safely. Engineering isn't glamorous. It doesn't make for Hollywood movies. But it's how we build civilization. It's how we connect divided lands. It's how we turn the impossible into reality. The Rhine Bridge at Oppenheim stood for 21 days, but its legacy? That's eternal. If you want to hear more stories of impossible engineering feats that changed history, check out our video on the Mulberry Harbors, the artificial ports that made D-Day possible. And subscribe to Warfront Verdict for deep dives into the untold stories of World War II. Thanks for watching.